This is Real Learning with Real People. These conversations are with real people. They're unscripted and they're designed to pull tidbits of information from people who are grinding right now to get the most out of their lives. With minimum amounts of editing and maximum authenticity, we hope to provide lessons that anybody will find effective, relatable, and entertaining. We seek to have guests that provide learning that's based on their life experiences. Some are chosen because of their experience as high performers in sport, business, or education, and other guests have been chosen because they have meaningful lessons to teach, and I want to make sure they have the platform to share them with the world. The language in these videos is sometimes mature, as I'm always encouraging guests to just be themselves. This is all part of making sure that we do our best to give you content that is both authentic and effective, and that you truly feel like you can utilize the real learning and connect with these real people. If you follow the NBA, then you're going to have heard the name of our guest today. Michael Grange has been reporting and writing about basketball for various organizations for a long time. Many people know him as one of Sportsnet's reporters who covers basketball at various levels. He's interviewed some of the biggest current and past names in the sport at the NBA level, and additionally, he's really helped grow the game in Canada by giving awesome coverage to the Canadian university and college players, both the ones that are playing in the US as well as the ones playing here at home. Now, I've been a fan of Michael for a long time. Since first reading a piece of his on the Tannenbaums when he was still at the Globe and Mail, I really connected with his work. And with Michael's work, it really does have that connection aspect that really makes you want to listen and read more. Currently, he spends a lot of his time interacting with the Toronto Raptors, and we do talk more about them than I intended to, because honestly, I just couldn't help it. In this conversation, he joins us from his car while on the way to the studio to report on the Raptors' run in the 2020 NBA playoffs. Here's my chat with Michael Grange. All right, Michael Grange, how are you doing today?
I'm very well. I was able to sneak in around the golf a little bit by surprise, and the weather held off, so now I get to go to work. It's all good.
That's good to hear. It's absolutely pouring rain here today in Calgary, and we literally got a special weather statement that we are experiencing a rapid transition to fall. It's a special weather statement.
That's unfortunate.
Absolutely, and I'm going to do my best to not talk basketball analysis in this show, but I'm going to end up going there periodically as a basketball coach, and I'm going to try and stay away from it and talk to you as much about you as I can, but at some point I think I might have to ask for a little bit of basketball thoughts.
It's the language I speak, so we're all good.
Cool. And you're an alumni of some well-known Canadian institutions in Mount Allison and Western, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah. Although officially, I'm not sure I ever got my degree from Western because I owe them parking tickets or library fines, one or the other. So, yeah.
Well, a good friend of mine, his name's Nate McKibben. He's the new women's coach. He just went down to Western to coach women's basketball team last year. And
okay.
When I told him we were talking today, he mentioned that you were an alumni. So as far as he knows, I think they might have expunged your record.
So far they haven't come after me. My daughter's there, and yeah, I did my master's of journalism there, so I have good feelings.
Well, that's good. And so speaking of kind of where you came from and some of your background, can you tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up for you, what family life was like, that sort of thing?
Sure. I came from a family of four. I've got an older brother, Jeff Grange, who's we were really close growing up, in part because we're about 2.5 years apart, but both really kind of sports minded, pretty competitive, the standard issue. And I guess maybe the unique thing with our family, sort of unique, it doesn't make sense, but sort of unusual, was my parents emigrated from Northern Ireland in 1965. So my brother Jeff was just a baby. I was born first arrived in Quebec, so I was born in Quebec. And just with them as first generation, they didn't really have any family ties here. And there wasn't like this Northern Irish diaspora kind of thing where people, so they really sort of had to kind of find their path in Canada, and that meant a lot of kind of moving around, looking for work, or not looking for work, but moving from jobs to jobs. as required. And so that'd be the one maybe a little defining element of my when I was a kid. Anyway, it was
right.
Different schools every couple of years, a lot of moves. And so my brother and I ended up, a lot of times we were the only kids we knew in the neighborhood, sort of thing. So we would just beat each other up, or I would get beaten up mostly. And that was sort of the how that all came about. We moved from Quebec to Ontario in '77, and then we kind of settled down when I was in high school in the west end of Toronto, more or less. And that's kind of where I call home. It's west end of Toronto, High Park area, and I live there now with my family, of course. So
right, nice.
That's the short version.
Cool. And so I ask everybody this kind of question. You're allowed to pass because it's actually a little harder than I intended it to be when I first started doing this show. But if you had to describe Mom with a word, what would that be?
My mom?
Yeah.
Wow. What would I say to my mom? Just very empathetic. She's a very caring person, I would say, but just always kind of had your side in things. And but not sorry. I think that's my alarm that I was supposed to call you. Hang on. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
No, there we go. Just kind of a mom. She had your back. Very, I would say, not. She wasn't overbearing or anything like that. Really allowed us to kind of, a little bit more free range parenting, I think, in the '70s and '80s. But so any one of those words, I guess. Sorry, awesome. I failed the test.
No, it's good. Honestly, it's kind of it's an unfair question because who can really do that in a word? Yeah. Well, what about Dad?
Just very steady guy. Just never late for anything. Very, very, very responsible. Just got things done, got them taken care of. He wasn't like the super fun-loving, life of the party type guy, but if there's things needed to be done, he did them, and no ego, just very low key. So, a good human being, I guess would be the broad description there for sure.
Cool. And so it's funny because when I started describing this show to people about how I was going to really have a 45-minute or hour-long conversation with people, largely guided by how they answered those first two questions about their upbringing and how they describe their parents. A lot of people really didn't think that was going to give enough to talk for that long about it, and sure enough, I've been able to carry some episodes well into an hour and a half, an hour 45, just because it immediately connects so many of the people that we've talked with to who they are now, or at least who they perceive to be. And in your case, I've followed you. I think I actually started following your work when you were at Globe and Mail.
That's a while now.
And ever since then, and through various, I don't know if you would call them, I would call them moments, though I guess they were reported on as incidents. Like even if we were to talk like the little back and forth with Kobe years ago, stuff like that. Yep. I would always see your public perception in comments and that kind of stuff. The people that really weren't paying attention to me seemed to think that you weren't empathetic for some reason. And now that you've mentioned that word coming from one of your parents, I'm glad to feel like what I saw in your journalism was much more connected with that empathy that it sounds like you get from Mom. Would that be fair to say it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I get it from my dad too. I think, they're just decent people, and I would definitely say, there's always going to be some exceptions, and to how you're going to interact with people, and certainly very famous and successful people, and certainly in, with the distance of social media, sometimes we all step over the line once in a while, but the flip side of that is you are expected to provide some you're there to be empathetic with people who require it. I don't think Kobe Bryant necessarily ever required anyone's empathy or sought it or sympathy, I would say. So that's kind of but yeah, I would say I definitely try to see things from other people's side and understand, that certainly the athletes I've worked around for most of my career, like you're seeking to know them as people, and so you make that effort and you kind of put yourself in their shoes and talk to people around them and I just don't really have it in me to be a guy who just kind of slams and hits tries to hit people when they're down or that kind of stuff. I just don't have it, and I'll never have it. So it's the people who do it are good at it, and there's a place for it. So I don't judge. I just don't have that gear. But once in a while you poke some fun or you kind of maybe make a joke that's a little whatever. But you do your best.
Well, and that's really interesting. I'm glad that you're reinforcing my belief, because that's what I see when you're doing your work. And I think that as a quality that we talk about a lot through our work here, and it comes up multiple times on this show with the type of guests that we've had, it's actually a quality of high performance is having that empathy. And I think even looking at the Raptors, there we go. I finally got a way to connect that in there. Even looking at the Raptors, you can see that in their inter-team dynamic, in Nick's coaching style and that kind of thing now. And I think that it's probably one of the root qualities that makes people high performers, but allows them to stay high performers.
Yeah, I would say so. I would interject that, these guys are, and I say these guys, professional athletes, certainly where I tend to encounter them. It's completely reasonable as either a media person or a paying fan to have really high expectations of their performance and their overall comportment. I do think that at times, as media and again, a lot of times you filter this through social media, which is, never really all that great representation of anything. But there is, it kind of goes both ways. On one hand, it's like there's people who see them as distant objects and there for your amusement only, and and there's kind of a dehumanizing element. Mm-hmm. But at the other end of that, there is an extreme word that there's almost like an infantile. I think the word I want is infantilized. Like there's a tendency to be so nurturing and so empathetic that you take away the fact that, player A is, a 10 or 12 year veteran who's has made $100 million and is about to make another $100 million. Mm-hmm. And he's expected to perform, and he's expected to perform at a very high level. He's expected to perform despite obstacles in his, in his personal life or in their general experience. The point of it is that you're supposed to be able to overcome those things.
Right.
And so I don't think it makes you a bad person or non-empathetic to expect that. And I think at times there's a tendency to kind of go too far the other way, where and we're very conscious, as we should be, of mental health and all these and other factors that affect performance or behavior, and which is all very good. But when you're in the NBA, as an example, you're expected to be able to overcome those things. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean everyone can. It doesn't mean you're a failure if you're not. But, that truly is the line that separates, the the best from the not, the very good from the best.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so I think there's a balance there that a lot of times people go one way or too far one way or the other. They're almost afraid to expect someone to really overcome hardship and challenge. And the flip side is that, they have no, they don't allow for the fact that, sometimes those challenges are too much.
Right. And I love hearing that perspective with your exposure to high performance. And I don't, when I say high performance in your context, I don't just mean the athletes that you're fortunate enough to be around. I'm also talking about the people that you work with every day, because the reality is, when you're with a major network, almost everybody that you're working around is what I would quantify as a high performer in their individual field, whether that's somebody that's on camera or behind it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a lot of them are, and that's sort of where I kind of get to that sometimes is we'll make allowances for a professional athlete, and in the meantime, the person making the allowances or the people who are, as you say, behind the scenes, like they're the ones with a sick parent, they're the ones who are going through a divorce, they're the ones who, have whatever number of issues, yet they're also at work performing, right? So, that's just the way of life. We all need to be empathetic and sensitive to people's challenges, but in the end, you gotta deal with it.
Yeah. Well, and performance is relative. It's to the individual and the day and the moment and the situations going on, and I think that if any kind of performance is relative, then that means that high performance is relative too. And I think that sits right where you're making your point, which is that you can be highly empathetic and have very clear and high standards at the same time, and balancing those two things and having high expectations is really where I think find some high performers.
Yeah, that's what makes it special, right?
Yeah, totally. And we didn't talk about this before, but I started my coaching career working with a guy his name is Sean Swords. So he's a coach up at Laurentian University.
Yeah.
And that's where I went to school, and so I spending time in the men's basketball side in Ontario, and I know that you've been one of the people that has been awesome for helping to gain attention and helping to really grow some interest in post-secondary men's and women's sport in Canada. And we were kind of right in the heart of that era where Dave Smart was on his run when he was still coaching with Carleton, and Roy Brano was still at Ryerson, and there was some titans of Canadian coaching.
Yeah.
All in the university league, and it was one of those things where you really felt like there was a group of people. I was fortunate as a super young assistant coach to be around the league at that time, but you started to realize that there's a group of people here that are seeing things that honestly at the time it kind of felt like it was that the rest of the world wasn't seeing. And now as you look at the growth and adaptation of the game, you're really starting to see those Canadian minds get a lot of credit where credit is due, I would say, for the forward thinking that they brought to the game, but also the craft of coaching.
Yeah, I mean, you would know better, having been in that mix. But I mean, watching those Carleton teams play, I covered a number of their championships, or the Final Eight that they were at. I think I covered the first one they won, and probably ended up covering 4 or 5 of them.
Yes.
And
so for those people listening who don't know, that's not even half.
Say that again?
I was just saying that for people who don't know, that's not even half of them.
Exactly. Yeah. I gave up. I got bored. I say I know how the story ends, but I do remember watching, the way they would play towards as generally always, like they were always so tenacious defensively, but I do remember like the second half, and they really had an emerging style and it was every bit like, and this is probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, 10 at least.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, it was very much what the top NBA minds are doing now, and they were doing it 5 years before. And you just had every guy on the floor could shoot a three, and every guy could put it on the floor, and it was just pump fake, 2 hard dribbles. If you got to your spot and the defense committed, snap it out, and the next guy would pump fake, 2 hard dribbles, and if that guy didn't get to the rim, he'd snap it out, and eventually it'd either be a wide open three or a layup, and it just never stopped. And then defensively, they were just bananas, and that just created such a standard among all those schools. I mean, Ottawa U was amazing, and Laurentian was really good, Windsor was really good, Ryerson was incredible, and I think you're right. I mean, I do think it was a very special moment in time where Dave Smart was probably kind of the mad genius, that kind of ahead of the pack, and enough crazy people, to say that in a good way, were determined enough to try and catch him. And as a result, the level just kept rising and rising. And it's as much as I did try to draw attention to it, I think it probably never got and may never get properly recognized and celebrated. Because we get so carried away with the Raptors and so carried away with guys what they're doing at D1 that I always say that the Raptors being good has probably hurt basketball coverage in Canada, because they suck up so much oxygen that there's no time to go and do proper stuff on other areas that deserve it.
Right. That's interesting. That's a really interesting perspective, actually. And working, I do some training and stuff like that for Canada basketball, and it's interesting how we just ran a course out here in Calgary a couple of weeks ago, coaching certification. And now that you say that, I had a ton of conversations about the Raptors and almost no conversations with the coaches. And these are newer coaches and coaches that are coaching high school age and that kind of thing, and not a lot of conversation about the youth game, about the local game, about the stuff that we have going on that's not on the professional level. Not that it's a bad thing, it's just kind of the reality at the moment.
Yeah, and it's definitely a reality of media. Like I remember around March Madness, you kind of scour across the teams, and you'd find a Canadian at one team that has a chance to be that's in the top 20, and they might not have played all year, or they're like a ninth man, but you would do a story in the Globe Mail about that guy. Yeah. And then now March Madness happens, and it's like you almost ignore it because there's just too much. You just run a list of everybody who's playing and see who laughs. But it's just a phenomenal thing that's happened in the past 20, 25 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be clear, like Dave Smart probably doesn't even remember my name. We only met a couple times, but one of the reasons why I thought of that was just because there was those moments where I would be in conversation with him, or there'd be people talking to him, and I'd just be kind of hanging on to like Swords' coattails while we had the conversation, because they're good friends. But and he would say just like a one-liner or something like that it gave me pause, because I would realize like that's something that like he just casually dropped a nugget of information that most people might not be able to come across in their lifetime, and he just said it in a casual conversation. I'm curious, are there any moments that stand out? And I'm sure that you've had a lot of opportunity in your career where somebody said something in an interview, or maybe like it doesn't need to be somebody who's quote unquote famous. Maybe it's just somebody who is in your orbit regularly, but they've said something casually, and you're kind of sitting there thinking, "Wow, that was more than just a couple words."
A few, and it's funny because often they are coaches. I mean, that's who you deal with so often. But some of them are funny. It's funny what sticks with you. But Dave Smart, I remember interviewing him, and again, it was early in his, as Carlson was just sort of establishing their dominance. And they didn't used to go to nationals and win by 40. I'm not mistaken. I think the first time they won every game it was like last possession, overtime, like all three games at nationals were, could have gone the other way. Mm-hmm. And they were sort of like the upset to go win. And it was sort of similar maybe in the first couple of championships as well. And I remember interviewing about why his teams are so good in close games. And he said, well, the reality is there's no such thing as playing well under pressure. People who do well under pressure, or teams that do well under pressure, all they do is maintain their level. So they just keep playing the way they would normally. And they execute normally while under, a more intense environment. And most, teams that don't do well under pressure, they regress. So that, like, this idea of raising your game, he kind of poo-pooed it. He said, no, it's not really true. It's just, you try and maintain your game as the stakes get higher. And I thought that was a super interesting observation. And, once you kind of view things through that lens, sure, every once in a while you should see a guy do something pretty extraordinary. But most of the time, people screw up because they let the moment get too much for them. And the guys who excel, they just do ordinary things, set the right screen, catch the ball, right? Like, you just allow yourself to slow down and play. And so that's a good one. I remember Sam Mitchell, I remember him saying one time, I won't do his accent, although, it's always tempting to, but he just says, like, when you think about it, how many days in a year do things really go your way? From the moment you wake up to the moment you go back to bed, how many days in a year do everything just kind of flows and, everything runs on time and nobody gets in your way and and I was like, you're right. Especially, as you get older and you got jobs and bosses and, spouses and kids and all these things happening that you really are pretty far out of your control. And it was just a really insightful thing as a way to kind of approach every day. It's a way to just kind of lower your expectations. Listen, once in a while, everything might just work out, but most of the time they're not. So you prepare and deal with it and be flexible. Mm-hmm. And you got a better shot of making the most of that day. And I was like, I think of that one all the time. Because guess what? It's true.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any other ones. I remember Morris Peterson once telling me that, saying, he was kind of new to dieting, Morris Peterson. And I remember him saying he had given up Morton's cheesecake and that it really helped him cut down his calories. He goes, that diet stuff, it works. That was one. I always think of that one too. As I dive into my Haagen-Dazs chocolate peanut butter ice cream at 11 o'clock at night. But I don't always follow it. But no, you're kind of, a lot of times it is pretty simple stuff. Sometimes it's throwaway lines. But it's when you hear them in situations and from people who've given them a lot of thought, you're like, what? There's a lot of truth in that, and they stick with you. So it's a fun job that way. You do get to hear some good stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting because both Dave Smart's line and I think to some extent Sam Mitchell's line are actually connecting to something that one of my idols, I guess, on the psychology side, Dr. Michael Gervais, who's a performance psychologist for the Seattle Seahawks. He says all the time that there are no big moments. There's only this moment. And I think that's very much in line with what those people are talking about, where it's like you can get really worked up or you can get overexcited, you can get really down on yourself, but all you got is this moment right now. And I think that Fred.
No, it's the reality is it's almost impossible to do, right? Because we're human and we're very we're very inefficient in our mindsets, and it's amazing we've gotten this far, really. But if you can kind of get to that mindset where you really do make time to prepare, and you make time to be rested, and you make time to kind of control the controllables, as they say, and then to just accept the outcome from there, then you may or may not be more successful, but you'll definitely be happier, right?
Yeah,
And that you'll be much less inclined to collapse with the inevitable shortcomings. And that's I'm Irish, man. That's those are the facts of life. Like things are going to happen, and so you better find a way to be happy when things aren't perfect, or you'll be miserable a lot.
Yeah, and I'm going to pivot here just in respecting your time, because I know you got a game to cover today. But we saw that not that long ago, I think, right along with OG's final shot in Game 3, where that it really not only did I see an authentic OG reaction, same way watching it from Kawhi from the outside looking in, where it's like they're like the most excited I think any of us have ever seen Kawhi was the moment they won the championship, and lasted all of 15 seconds. Because it really is just it's like that steady Eddie mentality, trying to show up and control what you can control, and not get caught up in the other things. And that goes for the highs and it goes for the lows. I'm just going to take a quick break here to talk about our new partner, Reflect. Reflect is the easiest way to find a therapist. Just like our guests here on the podcast, we all go through phases in life that help us to learn, grow, and develop. Oftentimes, these phases involve change. Maybe it's a breakup from a relationship and the new reality as a single person. Maybe it's a big promotion at work, juggling the new kind of work-life balance. Whatever your situation, Reflect helps you find a therapist that's a perfect fit for you. Reflect actually uses a data-driven algorithm and an experienced team to match you with the best therapist. Thanks to this, 80% of their clients see a meaningful improvement in their lives after only 6 therapy sessions. And depending on where you are, you can actually choose between in-person or teletherapy, so starting therapy has never been easier. Now, the cool part is that as our partner, Reflect wants to give you all $50 off your first therapy session. Simply go to joinreflect.com and use the promo code REAL50, all caps REAL50, to redeem your discount. That's $50 off your therapy session when you go to joinreflect.com and use the promo code, all capitals, REAL50. Thanks, and now back to our chat with Michael Grange.
Yeah, no, I think there are some really good examples. I mean, one thing about being around pro sports that you eventually realize that, I don't know if fans do, is how much of a job it really is, and how much of a routine it really is. Mm-hmm. And, so when you have guys who are, Kyle Lowry's pushing 1,100 games, I think, for his career, add another 100 playoff games, so it's 1,200 games. And, you know what? They don't play on emotion all the time. Like, they want some other, like actors, right? Sometimes you have to be able to access it and draw it out of yourself when you need it.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it's and I remember Steve Nash saying to me one time, it was a good professional effort, and it was like a Tuesday night in Detroit, and it was probably the last place he wanted to be. But they had a game, it was on the calendar, and while they're there, they might as well play great. And that's really kind of interesting to me, how we ascribe so much, to a lot of these performers when, and I mean this in a good way, it's like for them, it's just another day at work, and they show up, they have the routine, they get ready, they go out, they compete, and they have a high standard for themselves. And then when it's over, like most of the time, 5 minutes, win or lose, it's like it never happened. And which is kind of like how most of us are in our jobs, right? Like, I mean, like to the extent of when it's gone, it's gone, and move on to the next day, and because there'll be another day. And I think that's if you can kind of get to that sort of feeling without letting your performance slip, in other words, without getting kind of indifferent, then you got a chance to compete and perform at a pretty high level too.
Yeah, that's good. That's some gold right there. I like that a lot. And I'm wondering what is the feeling from your perspective now, being around the Raptors orbit for as long as you have been, and I do mean from your perspective on the not on the outside, but from the journalist side of winning. What has winning changed? What has winning given them from your perspective?
Oh, there's no question. I think it just all that kind of inner angst, that most of us can probably relate to, right? Like you just have that voice on your shoulder kind of telling you that, you're not doing enough, that you should do more, that you screwed up, that you're not good enough. Like
imposter
to an extent any of that exists. Yeah, to extent any of that exists for guys, who are at the level these guys are at, it goes away. And it just saves so much time and effort, right? Like, think of all the energy that most of us, put it, kind of leak in doubting ourselves and chastising ourselves and, worrying, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, and then look, there's a certain purpose to all of that, and it's kind of like a check and a balance, but most of us probably overdo it, and to what benefit? Well, imagine, it's kind of like if you got, a couple $1 million in the bank, all the anxiety you might have over money just disappears, and so you can just kind of focus on what's important only. And I think when that's what I've observed this year on this team, having won, is there's a lot less of that. It's like there's a buy-in because they've seen it before and it works. There's a tolerance for when it doesn't work. There's a kind of an acceptance that another day will come when things are going poorly, and a recognition that when things are going well, I mean, it's it doesn't mean all that much because the final test is in the playoffs. So I think it just kind of there's just an efficiency, right? You just get rid of all the extraneous noise, and you kind of are able to focus on what's important because you've seen what's important. We've seen what's important up close. You've been part of it.
Right. Yeah. A lot of times the popular term that exists is FOMO, which you've probably heard, like the fear of missing out. But yeah. the one that is exponentially more limiting in terms of how good we can get at anything, how high we can perform, is faux pas, or the fear of other people's opinions. And that faux pas is really the thing that we see get in the way of people way more often than anything else, just because they're so caught up in what others think, what others are saying, how they're going to be perceived, and not just focusing on their processes and their daily outcomes.
Well, and I can tell you, like, I've heard that over and over again this season, is this team, I mean, I think they probably had that anyway, but last year they sort of had the umbrella of Kawhi that kind of, they could kind of follow that lead. But this team for sure, now that they have a ring, they absolutely have none of that. They do not care about other people's opinions whatsoever. And and it's just almost like breaking through to the other side, right? Like you get through, you get that ultimate validation for all your work and effort and your talent, and you kind of go, wow, okay, all that stuff I used to worry about probably never mattered anyway. And then and it's just like there's just so much more time that you have available to you. You have so much more headspace for just good stuff,
Yeah.
And that's what I see.
Yeah. And so when we talk about your craft, obviously, I don't know exactly how you would describe it, but I like to call it like translating and creating engaging messaging, I guess, is a big part of journalism. And I don't know anything about anything,
Yeah.
but I think that those things are really important in order to be effective. But I'm curious, what is effective for you? Like, what does that look like or sound like or feel like in terms of your craft?
That's a good question. I think fundamentally you want to be sort of broadly accurate, right? So that's, you got to start with that. Like you have to, kind of be credible in that sense. And so that's sort of step one in terms of just communicating, like just getting it, right? Like whatever the issue, story, moment is, you have to kind of recognize it, see it, and then be able to present it in a way that's consistent with what other people may or may not see, what actually happened. And then if you can do that in a way that's sort of kind of an entertaining and accessible and entertaining doesn't mean funny necessarily, but just sort of like engaging, people like it because it's sort of, people, a lot of times people have watched the game. So if you're able to kind of put it in a context that, adds a certain value to what they themselves saw, maybe something they hadn't thought about that they didn't know, that's generally kind of a win, right? And you should be able to do that all the time. And then after that, you're a little bit at the mercy of your material and the event and sometimes luck, where you just stumble into a moment or an observation or a relationship or something that can really elevate it from kind of, good, solid, day-to-day coverage to once in a while you just kind of really, really nail something. And you kind of open people's eyes in a different way. And sometimes it's information nobody had. And think that can be, that can be really, people really get engaged with that kind of stuff. And, but it just, experience, again, having, I feel like Kyle Lowry, I've done it so much, but, that's one thing. I used to spend a lot of time getting really stressed about that. And I do still to an extent, but you kind of, over time, you realize that your base level of competence is good. And so even when the days you think you're not good, you're still good. And then you just kind of wait for your moment when either the story just kind of jumps off and takes you to a great place, or you kind of stumble into a bit of information or a perspective that does the same thing. And those are the good days. Those are the days that are really, really fun.
Nice. Yeah. And is there a feeling like when somebody consumes your work, is there a feeling you want that person to have?
I guess just that they nod, that they're kind of going, no, I see what he means here. Like I get it. Like I hadn't quite thought of it that way, but yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Or, it depends on the purpose of the story. Sometimes if you're really trying to do something that's analytical, and maybe you're opening their eyes. If you're really trying something that's more on a human level, human connection, like you really hope that they feel that. Those are very rewarding. And so it's a little bit dependent on what you set out to do in the first place. But I guess it would just be that whatever it is I set out to do, that they kind of get it and kind of nod along. Yeah. Like you don't want people reading that going, that's dumb. Like that'd be the bad one. That was stupid. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean, that happens, right? But it's more, yeah, I guess maybe it's more the feelings I don't want people to have. So
Fair. When you doubt yourself, how do you manage that?
I just draw on experience. That's been one of the few nice things about getting older. is Because I mean, it still happens, and it can be really consuming sometimes. And I'd say that the two lessons I've really been able to take to heart and apply are, things really do pass. Like no matter what happens, how you've screwed up, what you've missed, what you didn't execute, what faux pas, short of crimes, like 24 hours later, 24 hours changes almost everything. And so just really having experienced that over and over again, probably more than I wish, and then kind of coming up from the other side and going, wait a second, I'm still here. Everything's fine. The worst didn't happen. Okay. And so you don't want to be reckless and go, okay, it'll always be okay. But when you have those moments where you're like, oh my God, this has all gone wrong, you just kind of, I've got a lot better at kind of going, you know what, suck it up, live with it, and the sun will come up. And so far it's always happened. And so that saves a lot of stress, it's just having been through done enough stupid things. They didn't end you. You kind of, that'd be one. And just being a completely willing apologist. Like I am perfectly happy almost to apologize when I do stupid stuff. Because I mean it. And I don't think I've ever been someone when I do something really dumb or something that's absolutely wrong. I don't think I've ever not wanted to apologize and be accountable for it. I just can't conceive of otherwise. And those would be my go-tos.
Yeah.
Things will get better, and say sorry.
Yeah, and that's that. How very Irish of you, actually. I think I think that fits right in there. I want to hit you with a couple quick ones just because
Sure.
They're my curiosity and then one of the main ones that we ask everybody on the show. But who's the funniest guy on the Raptors right now?
Funniest guy on the Raptors?
Yeah, player or staff, I guess.
Yeah, I think probably Fred VanVleet, maybe surprisingly so, just because he's he does have his really dry sense of humor, and he'll he's a really, really, really good dude, and so he's comfortable in his own skin enough to kind of allow allow you to get close to him. Sometimes you can actually joke, and he's pretty clever. He's pretty quick-witted, so he's good. Kyle can be really funny. OG can be really funny. I think it's just you're not clear of how intentional it is. I'm not quite sure that one out yet. But anyway, but there's a lot of good people around that team, and that's one thing. Having been around championship teams, the old Bulls teams, certainly the Golden State Warrior teams, like it's amazing how mature and grown up they all are. And as a result, there's usually just a lot of fun. Like those Warrior teams with David West and all that, they were like they had a riot together, and that's kind of what I don't know which comes first, like the success or the comfort they have amongst each other, but it's definitely part of the mix,
Right. Yeah, I think as their proficiency at being a professional goes up, they're probably getting more and more comfortable just having that time to yuck it up and enjoy just laughing at themselves and laughing at each other a bit.
Yeah, no, I think it's a big part of it.
So I don't want to get you in trouble, but who's the funniest on-air personality at Sportsnet?
I don't know. Like it's. I'm always amazed. Like at Brad Fay, who I work with a lot, and just how he can be. If you're paying attention, he can be super quick and do it all in context and do it all part of the job. Like you're not like rolling on the floor or anything like that. but he's kind of really got these. He's one of those guys you really got to pay attention because he will. There are some pretty clever little quips he'll kind of throw in sideways, and you're like, "What? Oh, yeah, okay, here's what you did." So I'll go with that for now. That's just because I got to work with him this afternoon.
I would not have guessed Brad Fay would have been the person. Nothing against Brad Fay, but
no, he's pretty. He's got Calgary roots too. I think he played basketball at State. I think.
Yeah,
I got that right.
Yeah,
State,
he was at Mount Royal as well.
Oh, okay, maybe that's it. Okay, so it wasn't State, it's Mount Royal. Okay, there you go.
Which was I was just coaching there this past year.
Yeah.
And I ask about humor intentionally just because I think it's such an effective tool in learning, and I'm always interested to see who's got that kind of undertone because I connect well with the humor side. I'm not saying I'm funny because anybody who knows me who's listening to this is going to say I don't understand how you would connect with humor, but it is something that I think is one of the best ways to connect with other people, and it's always hard to tell, obviously, through the screen or through audio. The last thing I'll ask you, well, I guess not the last thing, because the last thing is more about some of the stuff that you're doing now. But the second last thing I'll ask you is when you're talking about facing challenge and learning and overcoming, do you have any good one line advice? You've shared a bunch of stuff, so if you're tapped out, that's fine. But if you had any one liners or anything like that on learning,
suck it up.
Nice.
I mean, it's funny. I kind of go back to what we were talking about before. Like, it is you know, and I go through this. I've got teenage kids, and and it's important that we make an effort to be all these things, supportive and nurturing and empathetic and all of that. But in the end, it's only you, and and bad things are going to happen you don't like, and we can all hug each other as long as we want, but you got to suck it up. There's no option other.
Yeah.
So I think the sooner you recognize that that really is the only answer, then I think it just saves time.
That's awesome. That's good. I like it's tight. It's simple. It's blunt. It's kind of funny.
I heard a great one the other day. Justin Bourne. Strike that.
I was like,
Justin Bourne. Well, I call him that. He's a hockey analyst with Sportsnet, and really, and he was talking about the context of kind of a role player in the NHL, and this is true of a lot of pro sports, but probably hockey more than anything. But if you're in the lower third or quarter of the industry, it's just a grind, right? There's a lot of good times, there's a lot of benefits, there's but you're fighting for your life, every day. Yeah. And he had this great line about some guys just got to hockey. Sometimes you just got to hockey it up. and it basically was, in hockey, I think more than almost any other sport, it just has this gallows thing where you're like a fourth line guy. You're going to play 7 minutes a night. And, and if you don't screw up those 7 minutes, you'll get 8 minutes the next night. And, your job is essentially to dig the puck out, chip it out, chase it, keep it in, get off. And if you can do that successfully 7 times for your 7, on 8 shifts, you've done well. And it's not glamorous, it's not fun, it's not what you signed up for when you became an NHL player, probably. But guess what? That's your job. So hockey it up. I was like, yeah, I get it. It's good advice.
I love it. Yeah, no, it is good, and it does come back to you control those controllables.
Yeah.
So I want to give you an opportunity to. I don't know. I know. I read the Unlikely Ascent of a Superstar, Steve Nash.
Mm-hmm.
And so I recommend that to people all the time. And And I'm curious if you have anything you're reading now or working on now that you would like to share.
I am not working on anything in particular. I'm sort of toying with a few things. See how lazy I can convince myself not to be. but and in terms of reading, I was actually doing a fair bit of reading during COVID. I think as a lot of people were, but it was really trying to avoid. I was reading more nonfiction stuff and things like that. So nothing really sports related, but my advice would be, and I get asked all the time, people want to get into this business or into it, or and my advice is always, do you read? And if you want to be in a communications type field, and you're not someone who just absolutely routinely reads things from a wide range and at the highest quality that's available, then like, who are you pretending? If you can't absorb other people's communications and kind of repurpose it and and kind of draw on it, then you're not going to get very far, my opinion. So that's my advice.
Yeah, no, that's really good. I appreciate that, and it's so important, because I think that sometimes reading is something that is a little bit downplayed, especially in the sport world by some, or maybe not downplayed, but not accentuated to the level that it is, and how many high level athletes do read regularly.
100%.
Shocks a lot of people.
100%. The number one stereotype I would dispel when it comes to pro athletes is their intelligence. Like, I think people are kind of pretty much understand that's not a stereotype that holds true anymore, but it's almost the reverse. It's like the number of times you're way more likely to meet someone, at the highest levels of performance, who are super intelligent, like really, really, really smart, than the other way around. There's just the demands for what it takes to excel at those levels are so great. The amount of intelligence you need to have to navigate all the situations that arise that you have to encounter and overcome. It's a point of separation, because some guys just, if you can't figure it out and deal with it and have the kind of EQ and IQ to manage those situations, then that's probably why you didn't, right? Yeah. And so the result is when you're dealing with Olympic athletes or the highest levels of pro athletes, they I really couldn't even think of one who I've met who I would classify as just not that smart.
Right.
I can't really think that it's ever happened.
Yeah, and that's so important for more people to know and understand, I think. When people are looking to follow you, where can they go to follow you? I know you and I have engaged a little bit on Twitter. Is that the best spot to go? Is there another spot?
Yeah. I kind of tapped out after one social media platform. It's like I never really got on Facebook, and then I got on Twitter, and I know there's about 20 different ones now, and I'm like, yeah, I'll just stick with this, and even there, like I've kind of dialed back on it a little bit, but it's actually, if you use it right, it's a great format. There's just so much information out there, and so many things, posting great things to read and think about, and all that. So the trick is just don't engage with people who aren't there for that.
Yeah, no, that's, and it's very interesting to me how many people can't manage to keep that barrier up on Twitter, which we'll probably start a course on it.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be crazy, I think navigating social media is going to be, it's already an essential life skill, and like understanding the difference between interacting with people you respect and know and like versus responding or getting pulled aside by people who you've never met and they really all just want to be kind of mean.
Yeah.
like that's something you got to figure that one out fast, or else you'll spend a lot of time you'll waste a lot of time on it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not trying to keep you too long here, but have you ever been or felt in your position? I don't know if I'll use the term cyberbullied, but I'll put it in quotes.
It's for sure it's happened, right? For sure, people kind of take runs at you, and I mean, the one time for sure is Kobe Bryant, right? Like he quote tweeted me because I kind of made fun of him in terms of, and it was a weird experience. Like it was like, I don't know how many followers he had at the time, it was millions. Yeah. And all of a sudden, like I just couldn't look at my phone for about a week because it was just one after another of people just trying to kill me and all that. And I was like, yeah, well, okay. And guess what? It passed. Like to what we were talking about for about a day there, I was like, this is it. I'll never be able to be on social media again. And then like after a little while, it just stopped. And you're like, okay, all right, it'll be fine. So, but yeah, in terms of actually someone setting out to, I mean, there have been cases of guys just really making a point of trying to get under your skin and call you out and stuff like that. And once you realize what's going on, you just stop. Just don't even pay attention. And sometimes people have a point, they do are kind of calling you out on something and then my approach then is like, yeah, you're right, or I understand, or appreciate that, or thanks for, people don't have to be nice. They just don't need to be cruel. How's that? Yeah,
no, that's really good. And then eventually just start posting pictures of you with a badass beard and everybody leaves you alone.
Exactly. Yeah.
So last thing I just wanted to say on a personal note. I don't even know how many years ago, but I still, I guess it says on here, 2000, I have a print copy of an article he wrote in 2004 called "What Does Winning Look Like?" about the Tannenbaums. And
no way.
Yeah. And I have kept that with me highlighted, and there's some notes in there from what they said and some anecdotal stuff that you have in there that I use in my coaching all the time and we use with our company. And so, yeah, I guess I didn't realize that it was 2004. In my head, it felt like it was like only 4 or 5 years old. But
no, was that like the Tannenbaums, like Larry Tannenbaum?
Yeah.
No. So the ROB magazine.
Oh yeah, okay. I think it's I printed it out off the internet, and I think it was okay. It's ROB.
Right. Yeah. ROB magazine. Yeah. No, that was a lot of work.
Yeah, I can imagine, and
it's very well.
But it's a great, as a Leafs fan and growing up in Ontario and stuff like that, I felt connected to it. But then as a coach and somebody who teaches and that kind of thing, I took a lot from that, and I still have it sitting here on the desk and that kind of thing. So thank you very much for continuing to do the awesome journalism that you do, and you've been doing it for a long time, and you're an awesome guy to interact with on social media, and I appreciate your willingness to give me your time today and share some of your insights, and I appreciate everything that you're doing for our sport. So thanks a lot.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and obviously coaches are the most important people in most people's lives, and great coaches are they never get enough recognition or support. So good on you, and happy to talk to you anytime.
Awesome, cool. I might take you up on that. And if you ever, I'm gonna try and brainstorm some ways that we can work together in the future.
Just because.
All right, cool. Well, you take care. Have a good day at work.
Okay, appreciate your time. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Make sure you subscribe wherever you get podcasts or to this YouTube channel to hear our weekly episodes.